Hello, and welcome to the Fair Deal Democrats podcast, hosted by me, Josh Kilroy. My guest today is author, playwright Paula Kamen. Paula is an accomplished writer with many credits in a diverse set of media. She started off as a journalist with the Daily Illini and then turned pro and had early success with the book Feminist Fatale. Was that 91 or 92, Paula?
Yeah, that was 91.
And then she went on to write a series of books, all of which I recommend. All in My Head and Finding Iris Chang are two notable books. Her Way, also another book about young women in the 90s, early 2000s, navigating their lives as women. She's written a number of plays, most notably Jane, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, which continues to be performed and have an impact. She's here to talk about her new play. So, with that, welcome, Paula.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. So, I am so excited. It seems like forever since you've had a new play ready to go. I know you've been working on plays, there have been readings, a number of which I am fortunate enough to have either participated in or listened to. So, but yes, tell us a little bit about your new play.
Okay, yeah, I take this great class, Scene Shop at Chicago Dramatists, and every Thursday I have to turn in a scene, so that really, when you have a deadline almost every week, that really helps your productivity. So I have a short, absurd play coming up in Yippie Fest, which is a 3-day, very eclectic festival, has all kinds of acts. There's monologues, stand-ups, short films, improv troupes. And mine will be on Saturday, August 16th at 3:30 p.m. at the Chopin Theater in Chicago at Wicker Park. And that play is about a woman who's about to dump her boyfriend, and then she realizes that he has the most amazing poop ever she can use therapeutically for her Crohn's disease. So this is actually a real therapy that it's been written about in the New Yorker and other places. So that's just, a good thing about Yippie Fest, they're all short. I think mine's one of the longest at 20 minutes. So that's a 1 day only. And Yippie Fest is sort of inspired by Abby Hoffman Died for Your Sins, which went on for decades at Mariachi Theater, starting in 1989, which was the anniversary of Abby Hoffman's death. So it's sort of a tribute to the Yippies. And the pig that they ran for president in 1968 is on the poster. So good counterculture stuff there. And then for my class, I wrote a comedy drama called Dion's House, which I think you had a part in.
I did.
Yeah. A reading we did from Chicago Dramatists. And it's going to be in the New Place Festival at the Dunes Arts Theater in Michigan City. Either the night of September 19th or 20th. I'm waiting for them to announce exactly. And yes, that play is about a mentor who had a house in Southwest Michigan that was almost magical. So it's about her very eccentric personality.
Right. I remember both the play and the mentor back when you were actively being actively a mentee.
Yes.
Great. And where will people be able to find up?
Okay, very good. Yeah, paulakamen.com, the nerve center of where everything is. And then I have an Instagram. I think you can find me at paula.kamen on Instagram. I have an author Facebook page. So yes, so between those three, you could find out a lot of stuff.
Excellent. And I'll update it on my Facebook page and on the Substack page where this is appearing. So we'll get the word out about that.
Okay, thank you.
So your plays and much of your writing is about women navigating the world, both in romantic relationships and in professional relationships. You've been writing about this For about 35 years. I don't want to, it's a scary
Yeah, that's
number.
okay. Yeah, I'm 58, so yeah, glad to still be. Yeah,
Right. Let's start with the women navigating professional relationships, like a mentor relationship.
hmm.
I personally, not a woman, of course, but I always found mentor relationships very challenging.
Hmm.
So tell us a little
Hmm.
about your how your character experiences the mentor relationship.
Okay, yeah, I've never even been asked this before, so I don't have a canned response. Okay, I got to come up with an original response. Yeah, it does make for very good drama, definitely. Where so the main conflict in the play is between Dion, who has this house in Michigan, then her mentee Judith, who's much more conservative, and Dion is very libertine, where she admires people who make their sexual fantasies come true, and she's like, in a polyamorous relationships and doesn't believe in monogamy. And then her mentee, this all takes place in the 90s, who's in her early, is deciding to pursue the life on the fringe, which Dion has, or something more conventional. And there's a lot of tension in these type of relationships with the older person could feel betrayed, the younger person takes a different route. And so yeah, every possible conflict I exploited in the play. Yeah, it's a comedy too.
Right. Yes. We should mention you're very funny.
Oh, thank you.
But along with the sort of the the professional aspects, there's always been sort of a generational, like you've been one of the Gen X writers, and as our generation has disappeared from the pop culture discourse, but a lot of your writing was about, particularly in the 90s, like how we were to navigate a society created by the boomers, and
Mm,
and that clash of ideals, and sort of dealing with the failures, right, of some of the successes and failures
mm.
of boomer ideals. So, I mean, certainly, Feminist Fatale and Her Way, women trying to navigate, ex women trying to navigate the world. What was the main experience? What separated the Gen X women? Just focus on that here from their boomer predecessors.
Oh, yeah, yeah. This is sort of embodied in the relationship in Dion's house, where the older one, yeah, this is very generalizing, but yeah, that with the younger women, much more individualistic and not as political about every, or more politically incorrect. So you see that at each generation, it seems it's gotten more that way. So with the Gen Z, you see more with like gender fluidity, much more talk about polygamy or polyamorous situation. So much more individualistic and less around organizing. But of course, there's many exceptions to that. So our generation did a lot of work to organize around or sort of laid the foundation for Me Too. Well, the boomers probably laid the foundation for us, talking about rape among people who know each other, and then with Gen X, with Take Back the Night in the 90s, and all this activism that sort of gets forgotten that sort of preceded the Me Too movement of the millennials, I guess. So all these generations are obviously interconnected. There's some theories that there is no third wave of feminism, that we're like in the second wave of feminism now. Yeah, that it's not as different as it seems. But so in Dion's house, the younger woman has written about women and the importance of independence and getting a job. And then she's making a decision to be a housewife and totally dependent on a man. So her mentor, of course, is horrified. She knows intellectually and politically that's not a smart thing to do, but is less political about it by choice.
If I remember the reading, and I
Yeah, this was 3 years ago.
right,
The
So I'm,
first,
I'm sure it's changed, but if I remember, the mentor, uh, her relationship had, and her flaw, the limitations of that ended up becoming clear over the course of the play, if I remember that correctly. No.
yeah, yeah, or trade-offs with everything.
Mm.
Yeah, each character is a huge contradiction.
Right.
That Dion, the older feminist philosopher, is obsessed with dieting and being thin. So you'd think that that wouldn't be the case. And then, yeah, and then the younger person, like I said, has written a whole book about women's economic independence, but then she decides to be dependent. So, yeah, just all the contradictions that all of us have as flawed humans, I guess, explored. Yeah, so Dion has trade offs where she's always in these relationships with men where she's dominant and they're sort of like in arrested development.
Right.
So it affects her when she's in her last years of her life with the guys being able to cope with it.
Right.
But then the younger character, Judith, she's sacrificing, she makes a lot of sacrifices too in what she decides.
Right. Right. Well, I think when I think of Gen X, which I rarely do anymore, it seems
Yeah.
to have lost its sort of palpable reality. But I do think of us as sort of more sober and cautious in the aftermath of the boomer uh, dominance of pop culture and American society, I suppose. So your most famous play, Jane, it continues to be occasionally performed. And these days it's often performed as a fundraiser
Yes.
for women's reproductive rights. If you could talk a little bit about the play and its continuing relevance to our situation today.
So it follows other work of mine. We're looking at generations of feminists. So I was Gen X. In the 90s, I interviewed members of Jane, which was this real underground feminist abortion service that did thousands of abortions in the early 70s in Chicago. In recent years, it's become much more famous. When I started in the 90s, people thought that it sounded nutty or they didn't understand what I was doing. I lived in Hyde Park in the early, and through my feminist writing, I had lots of contacts and started interviewing people who both ran Jane and used it. And those transcripts are now on file at Northwestern, at Duke University. Yeah, a lot of those people have passed away since. I'm grateful for having done that history. Then the play basically officially, after some road bumps, it officially opened in 1999 at the Chopin Theater with Green Highway, which was a group of very smart University of Chicago graduates in their 20s. And the high point of the play was it was in 2019 when it had a reading off Broadway, a celebrity reading to raise money for A is For, which is a New York theater people pro-choice group, to oversimplify. And in that reading, we had Cynthia Nixon, who's on every show that I watch, and Anna Gasteyer, Kathy Najimy, and some others. And then it got Jeff nominated in Chicago for an amazing production with Idle Muse in 2023. And and then since Roe was overturned, it's been used by a few feminist theater companies in red states to raise money for abortion funds. So it's so eerie to think of it being performed where abortion is illegal. So that's just happened in the last few years, that it's been performed in places where abortion is severely restricted in Florida and South Carolina.
Right, right. And, states where it is largely banned, they do have, people do have to think about how to, provide guidance and service to women who need reproductive, health services. So more relevant today than when it was first performed.
Yeah, unfortunately, as I always say, I would be glad if it just faded into the sunset here.
Right. Well, I remember quite clearly. I had never heard of Jane until you told me you were writing the play, and now it's become sort of an iconic moment in feminist history of the 60s and 70s.
A lot of them are much more open now because a lot of them are passing away. They know now's the time to speak up, so that they were much more reticent to talk about how they performed thousands of illegal abortions without a medical license.
Right, right, right. One of the recurring themes in your work is women's health, and how it's often misunderstood, misdiagnosed, mistreated. If you could talk, my favorite book of yours is All in My Head, and if you could, again, an issue that remains relevant today. If you could talk just a little bit about how that book came to be and how those issues are still with us.
Yeah. Very good question. I'm glad you asked that because the short play at the Chopin relates to that. That it sort of combines, with, as an author, I've written about invisible health issues in women and how they're often discounted. All in My Head was a black comedy memoir journalistic report about chronic migraine, which I've had one big headache since 1991, which has been constant. It's naturally an absurd comedy because all the crazy stuff that you'll do defies logic or science or your budget to try to get relief. And I was afraid to talk about my struggles with this, but now you have, again, the younger generations much more open, like talking about the most stigmatized health problems that have to do with reproductive system in the body. Just historically with Freud and before that, the more something was connected to reproduction, the more it was considered to be psychosomatic or hysteria. So you have people talking about endometriosis, which before was stigmatized as the career woman's disease, that women had it because they didn't have kids early enough. And so now young women are being so open about this that they were not in our generation. So yeah, I would like to combine all my interests and co-produce a short comedy festival about women's invisible and some visible illnesses. But comedy, again, it reflects the absurdity. And I feel like it's timely with all this research being cut, like in the Trump administration. I think that they just plugged in the word women to find things to cut.
Right.
And so all this research has been threatened. And with the new administration, RFK talking about it's your patriotic duty to be healthy and blaming the victim. So yes, so that combines all the interests: theater, comedy, women's health. Yes, and to deliberately relieve isolation from people that have other voices besides mine there too.
Right. But if I remember correctly, I mean, you tried a series of treatment modalities, some, AMA approved, but as things did get better, alternative modalities and just even getting people to take you seriously, that this wasn't all in your head.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, with the Freudian tradition, the 20th century, you could diagnose hysteria if a woman, quote, dramatizes her illness or acts out about it. So if I do a comedy festival, it would be called Women Act Out.
Right.
So, which I think was the most radical thing to do, is to literally act out about it. But yeah, with anything invisible, they don't see it on an X-ray, or if people haven't experienced it themselves exactly
Right.
to the same degree,
Right.
then they have no empathy at all. So
Right.
yeah, it's very tough.
And you never have sort of gotten a definitive diagnosis / treatment, right?
Or I realized in writing the book, so I thought I was a freak, the only one who would continue his headache, until I wrote the book and then interviewed so many people who had it. And then the internet, there's just endless blogs and podcasts and people talking about this. So I'm saying it's basically neurological. and there was just no research because they considered it mainly women and considering it to be hysterical women. But in the late 90s, a lot of research started when they were able to see it on an X-ray or on an fMRI. Then it became so like no one doubts that they're not real anymore because they could basically see everything in their research. So there's a lot more treatments just coming out in the last 10 years or so as a result of this research in the 90s. So I've gotten maybe 10% relief from Botox and maybe about 10% from, there's a new class called I think CGRP antagonists or something like that. So I go for a IV every 3 months of that. But they still don't know a lot. And yeah, when it's very chronic like mine, it's much harder to address. So if you have occasional migraine, there's like so much more than there was even 20 years ago.
I wonder if they've tried Wegovy. That seems to be the solution for every other medical issue these days. They keep finding new, it's like the new aspirin, right?
Yes.
Finding new uses for it. But well, that's heartening to hear that there's been some progress and maybe some expectation that more will come.
Yeah, I guess, and it's a whole other class coming out in a year from now too. But every time there's a whole new class, it's announced in the media like, oh, there's going to be no more migraines, and then they find out the side effects,
right?
And then they have the year later the new meds come out, and these are going to cure everybody. So yeah, I take everything with a grain of salt. But yeah, there is definitely so much more research than there ever was right now from the big pharma.
Right. I was just looking through Finding Iris Chang in preparation for this. And, well, two things stuck out. One was, her own medical journey, but also the importance of speaking truth, right? I mean, the events she documented, the rape of Nanking, basically, as it's called, in a way that had never, it brought it public awareness in a way that it hadn't been prior to that. And just, obviously she was writing 40, 50 years after the fact, but nonetheless, witnessing that suffering and, just as, today we see journalists, media companies giving Trump billions in tribute, and yet we don't have exactly that sort of witness to things that we are seeing. And I just wanted to give you a chance to talk about Iris because I know she was a close friend of yours and a colleague at the Daily Illini, and also, as somebody who was a truth teller.
Oh, that's interesting. Yes. Yeah. She was very upset about the government or about the U.S. government in her later years. Was concerned about her speaking out against Japan, which is a major ally, but then they didn't do surveillance on her or harass her or anything.
Right.
But yes, she was very depressed, and she committed suicide right after George Bush got elected. I don't know. Yeah. Yes. So yeah, very, very sensitive soul, I guess, to be a truth teller, which is a vulnerability also. So I think, so in retrospect, she seems to have just mental health issues that a lot of people have, but totally untreated. So I wrote the book to try to get people to face the stigmas, specifically of bipolar, that in some ways, if you're a little bipolar, it could help you as an author. You could stay up all night. You could have charismatic speeches in front of 1,000 people. But hers got worse, and it was totally untreated and unrecognized. So that's when it can really be a life-threatening situation, when it's just not treated or ignored. So at the end, when she finally got treatment, it was at the 11th hour, which is very common especially in the Asian community where there's even more stigmas in every community about mental illness, but there's stigmas about like you're shaming your family. It's not just about you. So there's an added burden to be silent about those things. But yeah, the truth telling, yeah, as we're seeing now, especially politics, like with Stephen Colbert being canceled, and all the things that Trump is doing, even like a museum, Smithsonian Museum, changing an exhibit about who's been impeached. So it's even harder to be a truth teller that with this more authoritarian regime and one, yeah, that's trying to control all the media much more than ever in the past.
Great. So it's exciting that you have these new projects online. Are there projects that you have in your head that you're looking to get to in the near future?
Yeah, I'm trying to get produced. I wrote something called The Pardoned, um, about a group of friends like in the art in the 90s in Chicago. One is a punk rocker, and he becomes very powerful in the MAGA movement, and a lot of it's about the fallout among his friends. So a big theme of that is selling out, which was a huge debate we all had in the 90s. Like it was so huge, like a band couldn't have a van because then they were too big for their britches. They had to go in a car. Or just all these, they always say nothing has more rules than punk rock. And now that discussion about taking a moral stance, yeah, it's not as pervasive, and it's obviously bigger at stake. So I sort of wanted to reframe that conversation for the Gen Zers and even millennials.
I was watching an interview with a director, not someone well known, but somebody who had some indie movie out, and he was talking. He was our age roughly, and he just said, you say you use the phrase selling out to people in their 20s, and they literally do not know what you mean.
Yeah, there's a guy in his 20s who read the play at a theater, and he's like, yeah, every aspect of our lives has been commodified, even our social interactions. It was social media.
Right, exactly.
So yeah, they're paying Google, $10 a month to keep your life in the cloud for you.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Right. Because otherwise you have no place for all those photos, for instance, which is what I
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, every possible aspect of your life, is sold out.
Right. All right. Well, Paula, I'm excited to see these productions. Like I said, we will have updated information, certainly on the Fair Deal Democrats Substack. We'll also refer people to your website, paulakamen.com. But thank you so much for your time and this fascinating conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. Great questions.
All right. Have a great day, Paula.
Thank you. You too.